to work with some extraordinarily talented juvenile probation officers. And in that venue, we worked very closely with mental health agencies. Juvenile offenders were often referred to counseling or drug rehabilitation or any of number of things, and I think we had a very good working relationship with both Cummings and the Hamilton Center and the other kinds of providers. Particularly in the drug area, I think that rehabilitation services are very much necessary, and it's good to use those in the community if we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brookwalter?
You know, the first thing we did when I came into office, and I met my staff together, is we sat down with Bill Nunn from the Hamilton Center. And I said, explain to me how meth works. Okay? What Bill told me basically was, meth creates this endorphin in your brain. I'm an exercise junkie. For those in the crowd, you get that high from working out. And it kind of like cocaine, it gives you that adrenaline rush all the time, but it kills your brain's ability to do it. So we had to sit down with the mental health people and figure out how you solve that problem. And what we learned was you got to lock them up about 60 days and get their brain clean before, if you let them write out on a bond, and somebody brought up in the sheriff's thing about no bonds, trust me, the judges have been very good on these meth cases, and we have cash bonds of $20,000 to $40,000, and they're not going to make those bonds. But after about 60 days, they're treated well. They're susceptible to being treated at that point. But you've got to sit down with mental health and make them a partner at the table. Eileen Johnson, Susan Stewart, I quietly do this because I don't want to get attacked for it, spending money, but I've helped fund Putnam County Mental Health. You know, their United Way money got cut severely. And my office stepped in to help Susan and Eileen out because, you know, they've closed down state hospitals. So we've got a lot of people that their mental health treatment ends up being in jail rather than that. The other thing we've done is work with public service agencies like the Youth Development Commission. I funded, again, out of our money, starting the Teen Court Project. You really want to do things, you know, educate early on. So we bring our teens into the courthouse. We have teens prosecute, defend, sit on juries, and they sit in judgment of other juveniles that have done problems. They had problems. Those are the types of things you can do with your money and make a difference.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Mr. Perry?
The teen court program, I think that Judge Headley inaugurated, is an excellent program, and many of the lawyers in town, myself included, and my partner Karen Temple, you know, frequently serve as the judges in teen court, and I would applaud that program and would certainly hope that it would continue.
Mr. Brookwalter?
Just wanted to point out we also work with Pi Coalition. Red Ribbon Week is in October, where every kid in the school, every kid in every school in Putnam County has a message about drugs. And we also have our post-prom safety. I give $500 to every post-prom group in every school on one condition. And that is, we're going to have a safety program about drugs and alcohol before the prom. And in 4 years now, we have not had a death. If you look at statistically, the deaths in our youth, bad accidents happen from around prom time through graduation time. So in every school corporation, we quietly do this, but we're there every year putting on these safety programs.
Thank you. The next question will come from the banner graphic, and it will go to Mr. Brookwalter.
Yes. If elected, what is the #1 issue you would like to work on in the next 4 years?
You know, Jared, it continues to be on a daily basis drugs. It's not sexy. We kind of beat it in the ground talking about it. But as successful as we've been about meth, it's out there. I mean, our numbers are down 91%. The surrounding counties are down 25%. And we were just at a state meeting, and they're on the rise, okay? Ephedrine was taken behind the counter. Thought you had it solved? No. What we have now is we have gangs of guys that start in Terre Haute in cars full. They go to Brazil. They go to the CVS, the Kroger's, the Walmart. They buy as much as they can. They come to Greencastle. They go to all of our drugstores. Then they go to Avon, and they get enough to make it. They're smart. They're trying to find ways around it. Doug Nally's sitting out there. We track it now. We have a tracking system with all the drugstores, how to track that. So we've got to be vigilant. We can't let up or the numbers are going to come back. We've been very lucky in that regard. Prescription drugs, they're not out there as much, but they're darn deadly. And they're really the ones involving our kids, okay? You know the Dietrich Jackson death. Kids maybe don't have the thought process to think these things through before it happens, but, you know, people, you know, I read a study that people made fun of Nancy Reagan by her just say no to drugs. Statistically, that worked. Okay. The dollars we spend, things like just T-shirts with kids, making them proud to say they're drug-free versus 4 years ago when they were joking about it, has worked. We've got to keep that up. On a personal basis, somebody talked about the new Supreme Court rule. Okay, the new Supreme Court rule says any custodial interrogations have to be video and audio taped effective January 1st of this year. One of the things I've done with some of that money from the drug dealers is we're providing video audio equipment for every law enforcement agency in this county, state on down, okay? That gives us a heck of an opportunity. Domestic violence. 75% of women in domestic violence due to self-esteem issues, due to financial issues, back up on prosecutors and do not want to prosecute. Okay? We've got an opportunity with this tape, okay? With the snot running down their nose and their eyes swollen and giving a narrative as to what happened. We're going to videotape every one of them. And that's going to give us the ability to have them not back up on us. And maybe we've got to force our hand a little bit with this videotape, but we're going to make that guy get the treatment he needs. You can't imagine how frustrating it is from prosecutors all over the state when they've got women that are obviously beat up and then they come to court, they lie under oath and say, I fell down and that's how I, hurt my face. So we've got a great opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Perry, would you like the question repeated?
Yes, please.
What is the, what would your, if elected, what would your #1 priority be over the next 4 years?
Number one priority, I mean, it's a more general goal, to have consistent, effective prosecution, where every case is judged by the same standard, where there are not special deals for special people, and where the charges are filed with care so that we are confident when a charge is filed that we have the evidentiary basis to go forward so that we can establish a pattern of consistent and effective prosecution. In this county, and I think in probably most counties in the state, a substantial percentage of our cases are in fact drug cases, and they always will be. And the area that seems to be on the rise is the abuse of prescription drugs. And we're going to have to be ready to combat that and to be prepared to perhaps even look at physicians or pharmacies who may be involved in supplying these things outside the normal streams of standard medical practice.
Thank you. A follow-up, Mr. Bookwalter?
No.
Mr. Perry?
No.
Excellent. Then we will go on to what may be our final question, and that will come from WGRE News, and it will go first to Mr. Perry.
What are some of the criteria you will use to determine how you prioritize the matters that come before you?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sorry. What are some of the criteria you will use to determine how you will prioritize matters coming before you? On what you will charge first, how you will charge, what cases take precedence over others?
Well, I think that we're fortunate in Putnam County to have adequate prosecution resources. We have a prosecutor, a chief deputy prosecutor, and 2 deputies who are funded by the state. And I think you have the opportunity to adequately investigate and pursue all of the cases that come into the office. When I was in the prosecutor's office, there was never a situation where we'd say, well, we're just too busy to do that kind of case. Obviously, more attention goes to more serious cases, and in Indiana, of course, felony cases are by statute established from A felonies to D felonies, and you would want to take most care with the more serious crimes. That would be dealing of significant amounts of drugs, Obviously, child abuse cases need to be a high priority, as well as domestic violence cases.
Thank you. Mr. Bookwalter?
You know, the way I do it, a little bit different, is, and I'm a bit of a control freak, okay? And I'm also, most people that go by the courthouse see my light on. I'm a workaholic, too. I screen everything C felony above myself, okay? To me, if I want control and I want to prioritize what's important, I need to make that decision. So I screen all those. I let my deputies screen the lesser offenses. I handle every child molest case personally myself, because that's important. Let me tell you what, the hardest thing in the world is doing a child molest case. And what I found when I came in was the kids were not having contact with the prosecutor trying the case. What I find works, because you know, you always think that it's going to be hard to get a kid to testify. I start developing a relationship with that kid right away. I bring her in or I bring him in, and we develop a relationship over 6 months. And to be successful in a child molest case, that's what you've got to have. The principal complaint I had from law enforcement, these guys sitting here, when I came in was, why are you calling me in 2 months ahead of the jury? We always just talked in the hallway with the deputy prosecutor before we went to court for a jury. The priority needs to be preparation. And if you're going to win cases, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the world, but you got to be the most prepared. And you prepare over and over and over again. You know, when the first jury I had was one I inherited that they filed the charges. Zachary Truax, who shot at all the police officers, and they charged a bunch of C felonies, and I increased them to attempted murders. And a state trooper said to me, you know, before you came here, if we were chasing somebody down the interstate, we let them get in Morgan County before we pulled them over. And he said, he looked at me and he got about this close to my face, and we got done with that jury, and he left before the decision was made, and he said, you know, you're okay. You're prepared. And it takes hard work. Doesn't take the smartest guy, but it takes hard work, and you've got to be prepared. That's how you prioritize.
Thank you. And now we have time for a rebuttal from Mr. Perry first.
Nothing.
Mr. Bookwalter.
No.
Okay. Well, we are at the end of our time limit as far as the questions section goes for our county prosecutor candidate debate. But now both candidates will be allowed a 2-minute closing comment before we go and end the viewing and listening portion and open it up for questions from the audience. So now we will go first to Mr. Bookwalter, and he will have 2 minutes to close before we go to Mr. Perry.
You know, being the sheriff or being a prosecutor is serious business. It's not it's not just a job you go collect a paycheck at as a government employee. And to me, the intriguing thing about being prosecutor isn't taking a narrow negative view of what you can't do, okay? My view is what can you do to make a difference? How can you change things? And I love the creativity of sitting down and looking at a problem like meth, or looking at the child support problem, or looking at child molesting and finding solutions, being creative and finding solutions. That's what we got to have. You know, there's no more money out there that the government's going to give you to solve problems. We got to use our brains and find a way. We've done that on meth. Okay? I haven't heard him say those figures are not accurate. To go from 78 cases to 6, I think says something about these law enforcement guys. And they deserve applause when this thing's over with. They're doing their job. Okay? They're not violating the law, going out there and taking innocent people's money off the interstate. We're following the law. Child support. Lifelong problem, nobody says you can solve it. Get creative and you solve it. You know, it's amazing when somebody doesn't have child support and they're locked up with a $20,000 bond. I had one guy claimed he couldn't get a penny and his urge was about $45,000. His family came in and paid the entire $45,000 off. Couldn't pay $35 a week, but we lock him up